So to begin, can you just say who you are
Yes.
and what your position is at Ubisoft?
Yes, I'm Darby McDevitt, DarbyMcDevitt. I'm the lead writer of Assassin's Creed for Black Flag.
Right, first question. The Assassin's Creed franchise has certainly evolved from its original concept when it first released, with many critics suggesting the first game was barren considering its open world nature. Each iteration has gained more activities for players, and rather than this be a lone assassin, players are now a huge force to be reckoned with. Was this direction part of the original concept, or has it grown throughout the years based on the critical response from players and the gaming media?
I think it's evolved as a parallel in terms of maybe some critical response. I mean, certainly the step from Assassin's Creed 1 to 2 was a big one. The amount of variety of activities in the world. Brotherhood then added some features. AC3 added some features. Revelations added some features. But sometimes things get taken away too. So, for instance, Assassin's Creed 4 actually has removed quite a bit of the accumulated ground navigation stuff. We don't have the Brotherhood anymore. We got rid of all the gadgets on the blades and things. We've really streamlined the ground navigation back to what it was in AC2. So when you're on the ground, I feel like our game really feels like Assassin's Creed 2 in some respects. We have these open-ended assassinations, and we return to the simplicity of the ground. And that was because we wanted to make room for the naval combat, which was all part of the pirate theme of our game. So, in part, some of this accumulation has been because the story we wanted to tell suggested it. For instance, in Brotherhood, we wanted to suggest the idea that Ezio was becoming a mentor of a larger Brotherhood.
Yeah.
So they kind of came up with the Brotherhood mechanic, where you call in assassins from elsewhere. Sometimes these ideas just come to us because we think it would be a wonderful new thing. But again, we do feel ourselves the accumulation, the stress of that accumulation, and so we sometimes strip back as well. But with, of course, the pirate theme, we just knew we had a certain number of things we needed to do to make a credible pirate experience within the Assassin's Creed universe. So that's why I think it may feel like we've added a ton of stuff, but if you look, we've also taken away a lot of stuff, and I think for the better. I think the key will be you won't notice what's missing because what's there works really well together. But if you look, there's actually quite a bit we've taken away.
Okay. Do you think the game was becoming more like Grand Theft Auto, open world, so much stuff to do, that it was kind of a fragmented experience, and that not all gamers would actually sample every aspect of the game?
Well, that really gets down to a question of design. I think that it doesn't matter how much a game has in it. It's more about how it's introduced to the player and how does it feel necessary. Lots of open world games can feel like there's too much to do, and a lot of them will feel like it's not necessary to do any of it. Like I remember in Grand Theft Auto, I went bowling once and never again. I didn't want to go bowling again. I didn't want to take anyone out on dates in GTA 4. That system didn't feel necessary to me, and so I never did it. We worked really hard in Assassin's Creed 4 to make all the systems feel necessary, especially in terms of character progression and your ship progression. So we hope that if you're wandering around and you say, I think I'd really like to have a third gun or a fourth gun, and you look at, I need to go hunt the animals. Boom, boom, boom. You do it. We want to make sure that everything's on the surface, available and obvious. I'm not too afraid of it becoming overbearing. I think we hit the right amount of activities in this game. Who knows? It's a matter of taste, I guess. But we'll see. It's a good question. I don't have an answer for it.
It's obvious a lot of ideas have been thrown into Assassin's Creed during its development. Was there always an idea that heading to the Caribbean would feature in the series?
Always? You mean from the first? No. The idea evolved about 2.5 years ago when we were seeing the naval systems come together. We knew that AC3 was the end of Desmond's story, and at that point it was like, okay, now the future is wide open. What do we do after this? And about 2.5 years ago, we started coming up with the idea. The naval system's looking really good in Assassin's Creed 3. This surprised us, back when Assassin's Creed 2 was being made. I don't think they had the idea to do naval combat in AC3. We knew that we were going to go to the American Revolution. But I think when Alex Hutchison came on board as the creative director, he and some other people had the idea to do naval combat, and then we took it over from there one step further. So the Caribbean pirates, that was very much an evolution of the mechanics we had available to us. So it was a surprise. I don't think, for instance, this is the first game that the original creator, Patrice, didn't have anything to do with. He was in on the decision, at least from the early days, to go to the American Revolution. Okay. So this would have been the first game that he had nothing to do with.
Okay, kind of on the same level, how does the team decide on the actual locations for Assassin's Creed games? What's the criteria aside from the historical aspects?
It has to feel, in order for us to go to a historical period, it has to feature a number of historical events that feel like they impacted humanity as a whole, that they were somehow an example of human beings be at their best and worst, something that feels universal in some small way. For instance, the American Revolution was fairly important on a human scale because it was this time where human beings were starting to say, like, do we need kings and queens to kick us around, or can we decide our own freedom, our own future? That was fairly monumental. The Renaissance was a big deal. The Crusades was a massive, upheaval in world, the way cultures interacted with one another. And so for us, the Golden Age of Piracy was also it was a proto-democracy. It was the first example of people trying to live according to their own rules and disrupting the way empires worked. The British Empire and the Spanish Empire were trying to make a lot of money in the New World, and they were really screwing over the native populations of the New World. And these small group of people were like little rebels, but of course they're kind of criminal rebels, and they didn't quite create the democracy that the American Revolution did. But
were they also under the authority of the monarch at the time, of the Queen?
No, they were living. They should have been, but they were living for themselves. So Nassau, for instance, had a governor who fled in 1706 and never came back. So Nassau became this horrible den of villainy and piracy and crime. But when people like Ben Hornigold showed up in 1715, they actually tried to make a small government. It didn't work very well.
No.
But so, and of course these characters were larger than life. Blackbeard was a larger than life character. So the Golden Age of Piracy was a small event, but it spawned these legends, and so we thought that would be a unique moment in history. I wrote Assassin's Creed Revelations as well, and that was one of those events. Young Suleiman the Magnificent and his father and his uncle Ahmed and Selim, and that period in history is not as well known in the West, but in the East and in parts of Europe, Suleiman the Magnificent and the Ottoman Empire is very well known, had a huge impact on the region. So we'll never be able to pick a historical period that satisfies everybody because everyone has their own history to deal with. Mm-hmm. But we want to pick events that feel necessary and special at one point in history.
And everyone can relate to pirates, can't they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How did the idea of pirate assassin come about, and how historically correct is such a character?
Well, actually, Edward throughout the game is just a pirate, but he's got assassin training. He's friends with assassins. The way I like to look at it is, in the other games where Ezio would come up and hire a mercenary, and they'd follow him around. Well, Edward is that mercenary. He works with assassins. He does contracts for them. They're always asking him, "You should join us." He says no. So for most of the game, he's not an assassin, but he uses their tools, and he interacts with them, and they're always yelling at him to shape up, or behave, stop being so brash and violent. So in that respect, we made a pirate game set in the Assassin's Creed universe, in which he gets a lot of grief from assassins and some Templars as well. How historically accurate would he have been? The assassins and Templars are a total fictional creation. Once you get past the Assassin's Creed 1, the Templars were disbanded in the 1300s. The assassins disappeared shortly around that time too. But I tried to make Edward as accurate a pirate as possible. He's got the exact background of a pirate. He's from the British Isles. He's in his 20s. He was a sailor. He was a privateer before he was a pirate. He's estranged from his wife. So his biography fits what an average pirate would have been. But the assassin stuff is all fairly fictional.
Okay, pirates and ninjas are a mainstay of gaming, popular culture. When it was first decided to include pirates in Assassin's Creed, some critics felt the idea was contrived. Was the pirate direction a clear-cut decision, or was it met with any resistance?
No, it felt very natural to us. It was mainly because it came from the fact that we saw that the naval combat was coming along so well. We did the research into pirates. We saw that pirates, used to live by a fairly democratic code. We thought that fit in with Assassin's Creed, the Creed itself, fairly well. This was long before Assassin's Creed 3 was even announced. We started making this game. So there's the contrivance arguments. There wasn't any contrivance on our part. We wanted to bring that naval gameplay to the next level, and a pirate gameplay was one way to do it. And when we did the research, we think this will work very well. And I think that when you play the final game, you'll realize it works very well together. It's a new type of Assassin's Creed story in that we get to have the main character explicitly say no to the creed, rather than this kind of repeat what we've done a couple times now, which is a personal tragedy. The main character is propelled into the creed without question, and he just accepts it and goes with it, and then you go from there. We thought it'd make a way more interesting story to actually have a guy who's introduced to the creed and he says no to it. That seems it's necessary to reinvent these stories, or else you run the risk of saying the same thing over and over again. Critics can say what they like. The end result will speak for itself.
So how much actual research have you done in looking into kind of like the pirate background?
A lot of research. A good 5 months I did since August 2011. And then I came up with I finished the first story outline in March of 2012. And all that time was research and generating ideas, reading tons of books. A
visit to the Caribbean?
I didn't do it. Some of the team did. I visited libraries. The other thing, back to theme. The problem with pirates is that the pop culture has made them so silly that we explicitly said we're going to do a real pirate. We're going to make them not silly. We're going to try to treat them as actual just men who sailed around and robbed people.
Yeah.
So I hope what you've played today didn't feel silly. I hope it felt very grounded.
There's a bit of humour in there.
Yeah, there's humour, but not slapsticky, not hokey. And that's the first thing that people. If people think the idea is contrived, it's because you only have the hokey idea of pirates. They're actually very interesting people. They're, nobody would say, maybe the idea of, like, let's say Italian mafia is hokey. But then you watch something like The Godfather and you go, actually, it feels grounded. That's kind of the same approach. Pirates have baggage with them that we can't avoid. But if you play our pirate game, you're going to see that it's actually not hokey. It's not. It's got a weightiness to it.
I think Jack Sparrow has a lot to answer for.
Yeah.
In that regard.
There's no Jack Sparrow. there's no real Jack Sparrows in our game. There's Calico Jack, but he's a pretty ineffectual guy, and Ben Hornigold, Ed Thatch, Charles Vane. Those guys are the real deal.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks.